Please welcome Ross Kemp.
I did have a little stroke round the corner.
Did you?
Yes, I did, yeah. No, I met the snake.
Would you have done that?
Wasn't she lucky? She loved it.
Yeah. Really quite, yes.
Tactile, isn't it?
Tactile, very tactile, sort of smooth and shiny and just really cute.
Nice, yeah.
A bit like your head. Nice. You see? Smooth and shiny. No, it's lovely. Could you have done that?
Oh yeah, I just said I'm quite familiar with snakes.
Apart from
talking about being cleanly though, you know, I'm pretty messy at home, but when I go away, particularly I'm away with the army, really, really cleanly. And one of the reasons for that is because if you're not, if you drop sweets, if you drop wrappers, that brings the rats in, and the rats bring the snakes in. They're not as friendly as that snake.
What are the soldiers like when you're away? Do they keep their own little camps?
Of course you have to. You'll get an absolute beasting if you don't. And there's many reasons for that, mainly your health. I mean, they call it D&V, diarrhea and vomiting. That takes more soldiers off the battlefield than actually injuries.
Oh, really?
You know, physical injuries,
Yeah.
So you have to be really clear
You've got to
clear
look
about
after
that.
your kit as well, haven't you?
Well, of course, if you look after your kit looks after you. If you don't, you can end up really needing it when somebody's trying to hurt you and it's not working properly. Who else have you got to blame then? So I think it's really important that when you're in situations, and you know, it's really important to look after yourself and to look after your kit.
Now, we've got used to seeing you on the front line in current war zones, but the book that you've got out at the moment is looking back in time. We're looking back to World War II. Yeah. Obviously, you've written fictional books before, but this is actually based, and you have a look at that, World War II, Britain's most daring special operations. What's it actually about in a nutshell?
Basically, after Dunkirk, you know, we were pretty much on our own before the Americans came into the war, and Winston Churchill, Prime Minister at the time, had fought in the Boer War and seen the South Africans use their commandos, raiding parties. And so we just didn't sit there waiting for the Germans to invade us. He wanted to show Hitler that we could still, you know, attack when we wanted to, and because they had such a large coastline going all the way from Norway all the way down and around the south of France into Italy and into the Med, they arranged raids. SOE, Special Operative Executive, basically the MI6 at the time, I suppose, arranged military attacks through using commandos, and there was, if you were caught, you were killed, interrogated and killed. So these young men risked their lives. And, you know, if it hadn't been for the sacrifices that they made, you know, there wouldn't be such a thing as I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of It, probably. We'd be living in a very, very different Europe. So I think it's really important that, you know, particularly at this Christmas when some people will be playing, you know, those games where shoot 'em up and all that stuff, and life, you know, you can go back to reset and somebody comes alive again and you can go off. Well, those young boys, mainly, you know, gave up their lives so we could play those games at Christmas, and I think we should always remember the debt that we owe them.
What kind of research did you do? Did you get to speak to any survivors, or was it based purely on
Most
academia,
of it's research.
or?
I have a guy that works with me who's worked on other books in the past, Neil, and you know, it's very hard to go and get hold of people from that time. And also, interestingly enough, you know, I've just made a film about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And, you know, a lot of those guys really do not want to talk about what happened. And
it was called shell shock back in those days.
It's been called many things, shell shock. In the Second World War, people who suffered from it, they would have on their records LMF, lack of moral fibre. Really? Now, you know, I mean, what they went through and what they saw.
How many advances have been made in the treatment of post-traumatic stress? Because obviously with my own battles, it's something I'm really interested in.
A lot, actually. You know, I think we are catching up. But the Americans are the first ones to actually call it PTSD after Vietnam. Advances are being made, but we're still a long way from actually curing it across the board. And the most important thing is the stigma attached to it. If you can get people to come and talk about it earlier on, the easier it is to treat. And one of the ways that most people cover it up is by drinking. At the moment, you've got something like 20% of all service personnel leaving the armed forces with severe alcohol dependency. And a lot of the reasons for that is because they're shielding themselves from what they don't want to talk about.
Well, Ross, what it's called, really, it's The Invisible Wounded is the name of your documentary. You've got a little clip. Let's take a look.
For the British government and for British armed forces, the war in Afghanistan will soon end. But for some, that war will never be over.
You know, nightmares, flashbacks, often think this war's worse than the war in Afghan.
Do you know what it's like to look at somebody as close as you are to me and pull that trigger?
It was hard. I never want to experience anything like that again in my life.
It's a really good title for the documentary, The Invisible Wounded, because if you see someone who's got an injury like a lost limb or a physical injury, you kind of know how to treat them. How do you treat someone who's suffering inside?
Well, just because, you know, some guys will have PTSD, will have physical injuries.
Yeah.
In fact, you're more likely to have psychological problems because of the physical injuries that you sustain than probably not. But also, just because you haven't got a physical injury doesn't mean that you're not injured, and that's why we came up...
I was very fortunate to go to the, very honoured to be invited to the Mind Media Awards last night. And one of the several documentaries covering post-traumatic stress and their help with the combat stress were sort of honoured at these awards, not necessarily winning, but they were nominated. And obviously the main thread is that it's still a bit like with clinical depression of any kind, it's the stigma and the taboo, and that people aren't encouraged to talk about it.
Can I ask, Ross, sorry, just what interests me is that do you think it's more synonymous with the fact that it's men, and men trying to be big and brave about it, rather... Is it the same with the women?
Well, no, I think it's... I mean, I can always remember this conversation. I'm careful what we say because of the time of going out, but I've been out to Afghanistan some 12, 13 times now, and like halfway through you get cocksure of yourself, which is the silliest thing to do ever. Right. And I remember coming back, we were in operations, and we came back on a pretty hard operation. We came back to Bastion, we were getting cups of teas, or, you know, like going to the NAFI and getting ice lollies and stuff like that, which kind of tastes very, very good after, for me, 3 weeks of not tasting one. And I can never forget the conversation listening to some nurses who had just been removing limbs, right? And I suddenly realised that what I'd been going through and how brave I thought I was is absolutely nothing in comparison to what they do. So, no, women definitely suffer from PTSD, and we had someone that was going to talk, and then she realised about the stigma that she might get in her day job, and she didn't want it affecting her family, so she decided not to be part of the programme. And I have to say, the guys that took part in the programme are incredibly brave, twice as far as I'm concerned. A, to have done what they did in the first place, and then to actually talk about having a mental illness problem, you know, it's a very brave thing to do as well, because the stigma again attached, that we attach to it. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we'll overcome those issues.
What are you going to do next? Because everything you do gets really sort of
bigger and better, to be honest.
Yeah, really highly revered.
Really?
Work.
Yeah.
And the book's brilliant.
I've got a BAFTA to do it too, couldn't you?
You're going to do a reality show, come on.
I think what I do is a reality show, really.
Actually, yeah.
So don't hide and we tell the truth, and I think that's the most important thing. You know, the media's getting a bit of bashing at the moment. I think the most important thing that you can do in terms of what we do now is to be very honest, tell the truth, and inform as many people as you can do about things that you think are wrong.
Yeah. You know, long may you carry on. I think you're doing a fabulous job, and the book Raiders is out now. It's Ross Kemp, everyone.
Thank you very much.